Hi everybody. Finally, we're going to get PostgreSQL and Flask working together to develop web apps. There are 6 basic steps. The first that we'll do in all the code that we're writing, the first we'll be importing these library modules. There's 2 of them that we're using from this install that we're about to do called psycopg2. At least I think that's how it's pronounced. We're going to connect with psycopg2 connect. That gives us a connection to the database. Then using that connection, we're going to create a cursor object, and that's basically the thing that's going to interact with the database. It allows us to generate queries to the database or give queries to the database and fetch those results. It's a database cursor is really kind of some highfalutin thing that enables traversal over the records of a database and facilitates this processing that's used in conjunction with this traversal. But for our purposes, or the kind of the nut and bolts definition, is that it's a thing that allows us to interact with the database. Then we're going to assemble the query string. That's stuff we know from the book, whether we're going to generate a select statement or an insert statement, whatever. So we're going to kind of assemble that or just create that string. We're going to execute it using the cursor, cur.execute. We'll fetch the results commonly if it's a select statement. If we're inserting, and this is sort of an important step, make sure to use concommit. This it'll actually commit those changes to the database. Otherwise, it looks like you've committed them, but once your session with the database ends, those changes get rolled back and you actually didn't insert anything. So this is an important step. It wasn't part of the 6 basic original steps, but I thought I'd insert it here. So let's quickly get started here. All right, the first thing to do is actually install that psycopg2 module. So sudo apt-get install python psycopg2. That looks good to me. It'll say, are you sure, or something like that. You just do yes. All right, and the next thing is, at the end of the last video, I showed you alien abduction, but let me just get that again. I deleted it here. Git clone, and let's hope it's actually in my, yep, there it is. So that's the address. Okay, so in Alien Abduction 2 here, we have a small little SQL file, music SQL, that we'd like to read into the database. So I'm doing all these kind of preliminary steps. These aren't included in the 6 basic steps. So there's a lot of ways of reading in that SQL file, but I'm just going to first just log into the database and server and go from there. Sweet. I'm going to read that file, music.sql. Whoops. All right, so I'm at the wrong directory structure, as I mentioned in the previous a video a few times ago. So it's alien abductions 2 music.sql. All right, so let's list all the databases. So there I have that music one I just created. I'm going to change in, let me hit a Q there, change into that. Now, as I mentioned in the Postgres videos, it's good to make a user. So let's do that. Music 1, 2, 3. I'm not very inventive with names with login. So that was successful, but let me show you a common error here. Let me create a different role, miss music with login. So it looks like maybe it worked, but because we don't see this repeated create role, it didn't. And the reason it didn't is that I didn't hit or put in a semicolon. So be very careful when you're doing this. You think you've done something, but if you don't get feedback, chances are you didn't do it. So I added the semicolon there and it worked. All right, and now let me, let me take a look at what the tables are in music. So there's albums and this album ID sequence. That is, if we have a auto increment field in albums, Postgres creates this other relation called albums ID sequence. So if we're trying to insert something, if we want to get music 1, 2, 3 inserting stuff, we need to give that user permission on both these relations, both albums and album ID sequence. So let me go ahead and do that. So I'm going to grant all on albums ID sequence to music 1, 2, 3. Grant all on. All right, and now I'm going to create a password for music 1, 2, 3. And here, let me get a good password just instead of one of these rinky-dink ones. Okay, that's a reasonable password. And let me actually write that somewhere before, so I don't forget it. Hold on just 1 second here. Let's put it in the server. I'll just put it here for now. All right, cool. All right, hopefully that worked. And then I think I'm done here. Let me see if I actually have those permissions. Okay, I don't. And the mistake I made was the one I mentioned earlier. I was the idiot that did the thing I just mentioned that people shouldn't do. It was the missing semicolon. Grant all on albums ID sequence to music 1, 2, 3 semicolon. All right, let's try this. That was a mistake just because of all that previous stuff without the semicolons. There was nothing wrong with that line I typed. It was just the previous. It just got appended to the previous stuff. Okay, and that gave me feedback that I'm more convinced works. And I forget ID sequence. All right, now if I look at these permissions, those look good. All right, so now I'm going to get out of this. All right, so let me, the first thing to do on our list was to import the 2 libraries, and I did that up here. The second thing was to connect to the database server, and here I have a few, not the correct ones. So my database name is music, that's true. My user was music123, and my password was this one here. And then my host is localhost. So that's the arguments that I'm going to use. So the database I want to connect to is music. The user is music123. Password's that long password. And my host is localhost. What I commonly do is put it in this try except structure, mainly because this commonly gives us errors. The server might be down. So a lot of times we think, oh, we screwed up somewhere else. This just helps us find where we made the mistake. So without this, you could just certainly say psycopg2 connect, but you don't get this feedback if you don't connect. You think, well, maybe I screwed up on the select statement, or maybe something else was wrong. There's no results in the database with that exact query. So this will help us determine that, wait a second, there's a problem early on, we can't connect to the database. So here's where I did the second step, which is connect to the database. All right, let's look at music here where I'm actually using this. Okay, so here where I say connection is connect to database, that connect to database was up here where I defined it. Connect to database, it's where I made the initial changes. So it returns this connection object. Let me get to music here. That was here. The next step I mentioned was to create a cursor. That's the thing that's going to actually interact and allow us to pass queries to the database. Cur equals con cursor. And here's where I've glommed 2 steps in one. Here's my query string, which should look just like any other query string that we use from the book, and I execute it. Here's how I fetch the results. Cur.fetchAll. And then I finally pass those results. I'm calling them album in the template, but I pass it to music HTML. So let's take a look at the template music HTML. So this should look very familiar. I have this for loop. So this is the results directly passed from the database for album and albums. And then here it looks like a simple list structure where I have the column. So I said select name and I don't remember what I said. Let me look what my query was. Select artist and name. So the first column will be artist, second column will be name. So that's what appears here. So fairly straightforward. Let's actually run that before I move on in my discussion. And this is that alien abduction site. I just kind of glommed onto it. So what I need to do here is go /music. And there's the results. So it gives me the information from the database and presents it here. Just as if I went into the database here. Let me change to music. I forgot the name of the table. It's called albums. And if I did a select all on albums, or actually let's do name, let's describe what's the table look like. So I have an artist and a name, so I can go up. So that's exactly what's appearing on the web page. Cool. So that's a way of interacting. When we get results, the columns are numbered. So it's returning the results as a list. There's another way which I want to show. So it's really a matter of preference. So it's grabbing stuff or from a database, and the database returns it as a Python dictionary. And let me show you that. The only difference is this line here. So now when I make the cursor, I give it this argument, please use a dictionary cursor. So it's going to use a Python dictionary instead of a Python list. A list returns the columns as numbers. Give me entry number 0, which was the artist name. Entry 1 was the name of the album. This will return it as a dictionary. Here I'm passing that list of dictionaries to results, and let me show you how music 2 in this case, that's the template that's getting rendered here, works. So here the difference is before in music I was naming it album 0, album 1, so the first column, the second column of the results, each result. Here I give it the name associated with it, what occurs in the database. It's a method I like, but it's just your preference. So let me show you that. The results actually look no different. It's just a different approach to doing the same thing. So we don't actually see any difference. So the difference is, are we treating this, is it getting returned as a list of lists or a list of Python dictionaries? So let me just go to music 3 here. Here's where I have this little HTML, and let me just actually look at it this way just to show you that it's possible. So this was my right click on a Mac, and this is just giving me what the HTML looks like. So here's the form that I'm using. So it's the action is music 3, so it's the same page I'm on, and I have an input field for artist, album, and rank. It's just showing the same as here. And let's just show you what that looks like. So my artist is Jamie Foxx. Do it. I don't know. Hollywood, I think, is an album that he did. Rank, I don't know, 8th. and it adds it to the database, and when we grab it from the database, it gets displayed. So let me explain that a bit. So here it is. It's something we covered when we talked about forms before. So here I check, did you get here by hitting a submit button? If you did, I'm going to execute this, insert into albums, artist, name, rank, these values. And here's where I do that con commit. This con rollback is if there's some mistake here and I get to this except state, I want to roll back any changes I attempted to put in. So if I had multiple inserts, this would be a good idea to roll them all back instead of have them, some committed and some not. So we need this con commit at the end regardless if we're inserting stuff into the database. So that's it. I gave you 6 steps. Hopefully those are moderately understandable, and you'll be able to do stuff on your own. So happy coding.